Hey, so I'm doing the presentation just as on the World Christian Mission as a whole, and how that applies to me, what I think God wants us to do, as well as what some other people that I've talked to believes that it means as well. So starting out with the Bible, God tells us, God commands us to serve others and to share God's light on others. And in Acts 13:47, he says, "For this is what the Lord has commanded us. I have made you a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring salvation to the ends of the earth." Um, and he kind of furthers this um, in Mark 16:15, where he talks about really that we should preach to all. We shouldn't kind of be discriminatory, that we shouldn't not talk to other people because of maybe the way they look, the way they act, the way they talk, anything like that. And so in Mark 16:15, he said, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation." And then again in Deuteronomy 10:17 says, "For the Lord your God is the God of gods and the Lord of lords, the great God, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality and accepts no bribes." And again in Ephesians 2:14, he says, "For he himself is our peace, who has made the two groups one and has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility." Um, and then lastly on that topic, in Romans 2:11 says, "For God does not show favoritism." And so I think it's really important that we make sure that we do the same thing, because all in all, our mission is to live like Christ. If we live like Christ, then we're doing our job. And so we shouldn't show favoritism or be discriminatory, anything like that, whether it's intentional or not. And then the last thing that I want to talk about in terms of biblical perspectiveness is he tells us to love everyone, basically love each other and walk like him. And so in John 13:34, it says, "A new command I give to you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another." And then lastly in Mark 12:31 says, "Love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than this." And so I think it's really important to remember to love everyone. So my personal perspective, I used to always really believe that it didn't matter. Like all these people talk about going, abroad and doing all this stuff. I was one that believes that you could just do it here, where you're at, wherever you're at today, now, anything like that. You can always be on a mission. And while that is true, after this class, I actually kind of disagree with myself. So I think I might actually end up doing one of the abroad mission trips. And the reason I say that is, especially when talking about not showing favoritism, or I know we talked about in one of our discussions from the readings, the importance of talking to people that is different than us and contextualizing stuff like that. And so I think it's important that we should serve others that don't look like us, talk like us, act like us, like anything like that. So I think I would like to go to the main thing that's changed with me throughout the course is I think I would like to go to a location, whether it's in the United States or in a different country. I'd like to go somewhere where the people are in some way or in every way different than me, so I can try to spread God's light to another part of the world. And I think that would be really meaningful to me, and I think that would be fulfilling my mission as a Christian more than what I have done up until this point. As far as the application to my life in general, as well as the church, in the church, one thing that I've always done, and after doing this course, it made me want to do it even more, and made me more confident in doing this, but I've always served in the children ministry. The two things that stand out to me from the course is one, Charles Kraft, he talked about women and how it's not just okay for them to lead. It's normal and it's kind of expected, like they're no different than men, right? But when we were reading Charles Kraft, he explained the story of how women, as well as some other readers or writers did this too, but he explained that women went on a mission, and they actually were able to make a bigger impact because of how they like cared and nurtured for everyone, but especially like the children and stuff. And so I think that's really important to be able to do that. And so I really believe, I've kind of always believed, but now I really definitely believe that it's important to serve the children at your church, because you got to grow them up and raise them in the way of the Lord, especially in a world that we're in today, where there's so much violence and stuff like that. But then also just in general, and again, I've kind of always believed this, but like I definitely, like, I'm 100% positive in this now after the course. It's just that we should live like Christ. And Romans 12:12 says it really well. I know it's a really common verse, but it does say it really well. It says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind." And I think that's really important, again, especially in a world that we're in today, because there's so many bad, sinful things around us. And obviously, I'm not perfect and no one is, but I think God basically calls us to try to be perfect, because we should try to live like Him, and He is perfect. And so I think it's important not to conform to certain things that people do. Not necessarily saying they're bad people, just like try not to conform to the bad things of the world, and it'll make fulfilling your purpose and your Christian mission a lot easier and better. And then, so one of the things that I did, and I did this from my field experience, but some of the guys I worked with this summer in Kansas City are Mormons. Actually, all of them. I was the only one that wasn't. And so I went to their church a few times. I interviewed them as well as like their some of their pastors and stuff, and their council. And one thing that's always stood out to me, and I just think is really interesting, is that they make everyone, at least the men, the women can do it, but I think they make the men do a 2-year mission where they go to a random location. They don't get to pick. They just get told where to go, and they go serve for 2 years. They can't use electronic devices and all that stuff. And I think it's interesting. Like, I don't think that everyone should be expected to do that, but it is just interesting because when I ask them why they do it, they're like, well, God calls us, they call us to live like Jesus, so that's like the most that we can do, to literally go out and have nothing and just talk to people. And then another thing that I really like to talk about, my girlfriend is Costa Rican. She speaks both languages, and her parents kind of speak both, but they're mostly Spanish. There are immigrants. Again, they come from Costa Rica. And so their church actually does a multi-language, and I think it's becoming more common, but still not a lot of churches do it. So they actually have different services. They go on the same time, but in different buildings, and they have different languages. And so that kind of goes with our idea of contextualization that we talked about a lot, which is really important to be able to talk to more people instead of just us in the United States. And then my reflections, the Mormon mission, I think it's really good because it reaches out to people. And like I said, you do live like Jesus. But I think it's kind of well known that Mormons do that. So some people might see it as forced, and that it's a necessity, not necessarily that the people want to, but that they're needed to. And then lastly, when it comes to leading the children, God, in Proverbs 22:6, it says, "Train a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." And so I think it's really important to raise kids up through God and through Christ, through Jesus, because they won't forget it likely, and they'll live like Jesus, and they'll be able to preach to the future kids, and they'll be able to preach to the future kids, and it'll just keep going, and maybe some of the violence that we've seen in our world lately will end. That's it. Thank you for listening.